Will, you're a web entrepreneur and also founder of the mobile payment platform Droplet. Quick question for you. As an entrepreneur, is it easier or harder to be a web entrepreneur than, say, 5 years ago?
That's a good question. I think in a lot of ways it's easier. I think, that Moore's law and the way that technology gets faster and cheaper has really affected the way that you can enable web business. So a great example is something like Amazon Web Services, the cloud compute hosting that runs most of the startups out there at the moment. You can get, £150,000 worth of infrastructure for a few hundred quid, and you can scale things up and down as you need them. And obviously Amazon aren't the only people in the game, but it is fascinating how much that's changed things. And suddenly startups have got access to phenomenal amounts of resource for pay as you go, pay cents at a time to use it. And that really changes the game, because suddenly you haven't got to wait for capital investment or cash up front to do these things. You can get started, try things out, and then scale them up as you go along. So the tech resource side of things has definitely got easier. I think being an entrepreneur in whatever you're doing is still hard. Yeah. I think it's always going to be hard for everyone. Trying to make something happen it is very, very difficult. And
what about the kind of the UK is well famed for having a kind of a slightly more cautious approach to kind of risk than, say, the US. Have you seen that change at all in the last few years?
It's getting better. I mean, the fact that Droplet has been funded at all by venture capitalists is pretty surprising, and is proof that that's happening, because we don't make any revenue, and we're quite open with our investors that we don't plan to make any revenue for some time. I suppose what's interesting is that if you look at the Valley, and there's so much envy for the Valley across Europe and the UK. Everyone wants the UK to build a Google or a Facebook or a Twitter. But the problem is, people don't, the investors don't realise, or they don't seem to connect the fact that Google, Facebook and Twitter didn't make any money for, 5-10 years. Google didn't make any money for 8 to 10 years. They had $100 million of investment, and they stumbled into an ad platform because they bought it from someone else. And people sort of forget that, and now they make 11 billion a quarter, I think, on AdWords. So we're never going to get the UK's equivalent of Facebook, Twitter, Google, without investors who are willing to take that punt and say, we need to get you to scale to make this happen. It seems like the ambition and the risk isn't there on the half of investors.
So it's not just kind of that attitude to risk, it's actually attitude to timescales as well, I guess.
Absolutely.
It's actually because you've been over in Silicon Valley recently, haven't you?
How's
that compared culturally and
Sure.
kind of their approach?
So we went to the Valley to try and raise money for Droplet. We didn't in the end. What we did do was get offers. We got offers to raise the money, but with lots of conditions around actually building the business in the US, and that was certainly what that kind of took us by surprise, but shouldn't have really with hindsight. Yeah. But US investors want to build a company in the US. The total addressable market is enormous. It's 20 times the size of the UK, or a few times the size of Europe. It's a phenomenal market. Obviously, we've all got ties here, and we've got families and all kinds of things, so we weren't that keen to move it to the US. The appetite for risk is much larger. I think the vision and the time scale is there. But that's been built up over time. Silicon Valley has taken 20 years to get to the point that it's at now, and it won't happen overnight. But I think things are moving in the right direction in the UK, and I think, especially if we start to see some decent size exits of companies, we'll start to get the confidence build, and maybe in 15, 20 years' time we'll have the same sort of ecosystem, but it will take a while.
So the UK too needs to be in the long run, essentially.
It needs to be in the long game, and too often it's a gradual process, isn't it? If an investor puts $1 million in and they get a 5 million return, they're happy. Where in the US they're looking for 10, 20, 50 time returns on the money that goes in, because the scale of everything they're doing is just so much larger. And I don't think we will see the UK's Twitter until the investors have that vision.
Will Grant, thank you very much.
You're welcome.